Within the first 5 minutes of watching Midsommar, I was hooked. I stopped listening to my podcast, closed my laptop and turned off my phone, and immediately started to take the film deadly seriously. The roller coaster of emotions just kept coming and coming, and in the end, I was breathless. A lot has been said about how cathartic this film is, and I have to say, it was the most cathartic film experience of my entire life.
Spoilers ahead, let's talk film. Midsommar is a 2019 film directed by Ari Aster and starring Florence Pugh. Florence Pugh plays Dani Ardor, a psychology student who goes through a traumatic family tragedy, receiving only rudimentary emotional support from apparently the only other person in her life, her absolute bastard of a boyfriend Christian, a seething, violent, vitriolic hunk of a man who's actually a lot more complicated than you expect, but really, underneath it all, he's a pathetic, wormy, spiteful, feckless son of a...
Cut to the following year, and Dani receives a half-hearted invitation from Christian and his friends to attend a unique and once-in-a-lifetime midsummer celebration from their Swedish friend and his ancestral commune.
So they all go to Sweden, they take hallucinogenic substances, they watch the Midsommar celebrations, they get freaked out by a horrifying ritual but decide, nah, let's just stay. Then some of the party start to disappear, but the rest of the group are unfazed by that particular problem and just decide to stick around and sort of mooch about a little bit. They watch more of the Midsommar celebrations, another bunch of people disappear, and yet again, the remaining characters don't seem to notice this. Dani is crowned May Queen, Christian is poisoned and cheats on her, and finally we discover to our absolute shock and complete surprise that the commune is a cult with quite a fancy for human sacrifice, and Dani gets to live her best life by condemning her poisoned hunk of a boyfriend to death by fire.
Now, the first thing to say about this film, because I think people are in danger of totally misunderstanding this artistic achievement, is that it is not a horror film.
Sure, it takes inspiration from horror, sure there are moments of horror, even whole scenes of horror, including an entire ending filled with horror. The trailer might cut it together like it's a horror film, and Wikipedia calls it a horror film, and general audiences might call it a horror film too, but I personally do not believe it to be a horror film. It's more of a feel-good melodrama, set amidst the backdrop of a heady and intoxicating European festival of sunshine and laughter. But wait, there's trouble on the horizon.
The horror is kind of like having icing on a cake, then having that cake and eating it while simultaneously denying that the cake has any icing on it or that you've even eaten the cake.
It's brilliant.
So what did I think of this film? Well, I thought it was a triumph of length, girth, width and breadth.
From the much talked about accurate depiction of a crumbling relationship through to the much less talked about accurate depiction of people not running away from a complete horror show, this film was a consistent thrill ride.
The actors were all universally great. They had noses, they had ears, and most importantly, they had eyes. Sometimes those eyes moved up and down, sometimes left to right. I even thought I saw a smirk at one point.
Now, when I finished the film, I went to the kitchen to fix myself a Chemex coffee, and as I always do, I had an epiphany as to what the theme of this movie was.
In the end, I thought it was the tragic story of a woman who suffered a horrendous trauma and with no emotional support to speak of, succumbs to the allure of a cult, finally receiving that familial nourishment she so desperately craved and needed. It posits how we would react if we were met with stony indifference or resentment by our loved ones and social groups. Would we abandon them, metaphorically killing them off, even if the thing we were running to was completely fucking nightmarish and awful? That is the tragedy of Midsommar.
But I've since learned that director Ari Aster has a different interpretation of his own movie, saying that it's not about a cult at all, but about the breakdown of a relationship.
I disagreed with Ari Aster for about 5 minutes, but then I had another epiphany whilst I was buying a gooseneck kettle from an old Moldovan tea shop lady, and I realised, he's right. It's not about a cult at all.
The cult only takes up 2 hours and 10 minutes worth of screen time, and even though the rituals are long, intricate, detailed, thorough, comprehensive, meticulous, all-encompassing, mesmerising, confusing and punctilious, it really is all about the breakdown of a relationship. The relationships you have in college are some of the most powerful, most memorable and most important you could ever possibly have in your entire life. And what better way to realise you're in a mildly toxic relationship with a not entirely unreasonable partner is to just simply put your feet up at an incredibly subtle festival of human sacrifice, hardly notice your friends getting picked off one by one, and then in the end become judge, jury and executioner of your entire relationship as you watch your partner die to death in a bear carcass. It's amazing.
For me, the ending was cathartic, uplifting even, and I definitely didn't have a bad taste in my mouth. I felt purged. I felt like crying for all the bad relationships that happened to me in my life and that I'm gonna suddenly burden you with. The film made me realise that my feelings are paramount. Everyone else around me is either wrong or my enemy. I deserve absolute happiness at all costs, and I should never ever ever be judged on my character. In the end, Midsommar will be held up alongside other lofty relationship movies such as 500 Days of Summer, The Holiday, or Forgetting Sarah Marshall. You deserve this film.